Innovation is not just for urban cities. Second and third tier markets are finding ways to identify and organize innovation assets and create places where creative and digital talent thrive. As a result of the coronavirus pandemic, employers are more willing to decentralize their workforce and look at non-urban markets as unique, accessible places for creativity, invention, and growth. Our keynote speaker today is Julie Huls. She's the founder and CEO of Waymaker Group, which is probably the most appropriate title of a company I have introduced today. Julie helps smart cities power institutional change fueled by technology, which all of us have struggled with lately. So what an appropriate time to be changing institutions with technology, because we all need a little bit of a tune-up on that, right? Mm-hmm. Ms. Huls has 20 years of experience in management and strategic initiatives and a track record of engaging and strengthening relationships within the business and community stakeholders required to execute bold visions. Ms. Huls has served as the president and CEO of the Austin Technology Council, an association that represents 300 Central Texas technology companies, their executives, and over $29 billion in annual regional economic impact. While at the Tech Council, Ms. Huls led regional technology CXOs and startup entrepreneurs, through the strategic planning process, conducted the first regional technology economic impact study, negotiated the first tech industry partnership with the city of Austin, and launched the annual CEO Summit, a regional leadership platform event that consistently garnered national media attention. While at ATC, Julie served on the board of directors at the Technology Councils of North America, an international organization of CEOs leading technology industry advocacy and educational associations. Additionally, she has served as the CEO of the Museum, a STEM education organization and children's museum in San Antonio, Texas. And now that I am clearly introducing a person way above my pay grade, mute myself and get out of the way for the good stuff.
Oh my gosh. Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, that background sounds really fancy. Before I tell you just a little bit about my non-fancy background, I want to really acknowledge Linda and Tatiana and AmeriCorps. I actually have had the experience of partnering with them actually while I was with the museum, and can absolutely attest to their effectiveness and how easy it is to work with their organization. We leaned very heavily on the AmeriCorps for a number of years while I was at the museum. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about my personal background, just because I think it's really relevant, and it frankly is absolutely what drives us as a mission within Waymaker Group. We have a very small, but I'd like to think mighty team of individuals that have various backgrounds in economic development, some in higher education, but all of us are very passionate, and frankly, all of us have personal histories in either rural environments or tier 2 or tier 3 markets, and we gauge tiers by population. So I was personally raised on a farm. The work that we do at Waymaker Group is a direct result of the experience I had growing up in Illinois. I have walked beans and detasseled corn and fed the hogs. And so, as we all know, our economy over the last 30 years has changed very rapidly. That was absolutely the case in my part of the country, in the upper Midwest. It's the case everywhere in the US. Clearly, as those jobs in agriculture and manufacturing left the building, and as they continue to really transition and open up into a more digital situation or pathway, it's really become a personal passion of mine and my team's to support the tier 2 and tier 3 markets. So we have a focus of supporting markets in the middle part of the country. Frankly, that means anything that's not New York or San Francisco. So today, I'm not going to, by the way, pretend to have all of the answers. I want to really thank Cindy and Stephanie for allowing me the opportunity to visit with you folks today. I will tell you that the content today is really offered in terms of some of the best practices that we've experienced firsthand over our professional careers, as well as over the last 2 to 3 years since we started Waymaker Group. And I think what we are talking about today in terms of innovation fits absolutely perfectly into the work that you guys are already doing with the collaborative. I have always, by the way, been impressed with the economic development work that Georgia has done. You guys you're doing so many things so well. I will tell you, I really wish there were more placemaking collaboratives around the country, because it makes our work a lot easier. So having said all of that, let's maybe talk first about how we can begin to talk about integrating some really practical principles as it relates to innovation. And with that, I think that one of the more important things that I have to say today is that when we use the term innovation at Waymaker Group, we are using that term in the most broad sense, right? You're going to hear me interchange the term innovation with digital and with technology. It's really important. I think those terms, frankly, can be a little intimidating. They were for me, they have been for me historically. I am not a technologist, but I will tell you as a practitioner that digital is here to stay, and that if we as economic development leaders are going to be able to offer any sort of success or growth within our local economies, these are principles and concepts that we really are encouraging economic development leaders to embrace early and to embrace often. So we know that innovation is relevant to every community, right? Even within some of the very traditional industries, including agriculture, manufacturing, etc., we are seeing a much higher concentration of digitally based occupations. The growth within these occupations and within these traditional industries is moving at a really fast pace. And so I think one of the key messages we're really trying to encourage today is that today is the day, right? Now is the time to begin to think about innovation, again, in the broadest sense, and to begin to take those small steps forward in terms of how we can get our communities prepared. I will tell you also in no uncertain terms that without placemaking at the center, there is no innovation, and there's really not a lot of need for discussion around digital growth, and that is because every community needs to really begin to think about how they can center their growth strategies around talent. And in order to attract and retain your talent, you have to really be successful at creating a very unique place within your community. So here are also just a couple of things I want to acknowledge before we jump into the principles. This is, as Kyle mentioned, a really unprecedented time. We were experiencing, really an unparalleled rate of change prior to COVID. The onset of COVID, for better or for worse, really is accelerating the rate with which digital economies are moving forward, right? And so I just want to acknowledge, first of all, how tough it is for everyone out there today. We're in conversations and we're working in a lot of communities that are frankly struggling, right? This is a tough game, and this is a relatively new game for our country. Thankfully, the rules of economic prosperity are also changing really quickly. And so I think in terms of society, we are also finally getting to a place where we understand that everyone has to be included. I've never heard as much talk, thank God, as I have lately about equity and inclusion, and we'll touch on that today. I think the last thing I want to acknowledge is that I know that, and I've had the opportunity through Cindy and Stephanie to talk with a handful of leaders there in Georgia, and I hear that that a common theme there is the concern regarding brain drain. You guys have, remarkable cities, remarkable higher education institutions, but I think there's still this overall concern about the state losing, or communities individually losing talent. This is the #1 concern throughout the country, right? Unless you're living in New York or Austin or San Francisco, which most of us are not. So I think that this is the topic of our day, and this is something that we all really have to work together on in terms of sharing best practices. The great news is, in terms of opportunities for all of us within our smaller markets, is that you can take small steps forward And those small steps can have big impact, and that's really the purpose of offering some of these principles. I think also, as Kyle mentioned, there are two really significant paradigm shifts in this country that are happening as a result of COVID that all of us in Tier 2 and Tier 3 markets absolutely need to leverage, and that is work from home becoming more of a permanent shift. I'm not implying that 100% of all employees will continue to work from home or that they're able to, but in terms of some of the professional occupations that are typically within these digital or creative industries, this is absolutely going to remain more of a permanent aspect of our local economies, thankfully. So our markets, our communities have a really important opportunity to retain that talent and even to attract new talent in. Workforce redistribution, we've just started to see some recent headlines from tech companies in particular in California, Amazon, a couple of the other e-commerce sites, and as well as Google, I think, have all announced, Facebook, they have all announced that they are not going to hire any new employees on the West Coast. They are slowly coming into them long enough. And so I think this represents another really important opportunity for us, even if it is, by retaining small numbers of these digitally based employees. I think, and this is why, right? This is why I think as economic development leaders, we are all chasing innovation-based economies or certain aspects of innovation-based economies. We know that these jobs, whether it's, by the way, within the creative industries or the digital industries, they pay more, the growth is happening at a faster rate. And I think maybe one of the more important things for us as leaders to consider is that the multiplier effects are much greater, right? And so to the degree, obviously, they're paying high communities, this means we're going to actually have a more significant impact in terms of multiplier effect. So let's jump into some of the principles. I think this first principle, again, for better or for worse, is really the most important. I will tell you it's also the hardest. I will confess to you that at Waymaker Group, we probably spend 80% of our time on practical principle number one, shifting the mindset of a community, getting everybody on the same page, visioning collectively within the community and with leaders from all of the myriad institutions, sometimes within the region. These are the toughest things, right? It takes time to get everyone on the same page. It takes time, rather, for people to really truly kind of catch up to the notion that some of our traditional economic development rules have shifted, and that really is a result of this new talent-driven strategies that I think all of us really should be focused on right now. So I will give you one example. We're working right now up in a small community in Wisconsin. This community has, I say small, it has 100,000 people, which where I'm from is significant, but they have a large parcel of land. They're interested in building an innovation district, or at least building buildings and attracting entrepreneurs and innovation-based occupations, those also from creative sectors. And it has taken us 2 years to get everyone within that community on the same page. I think projects like this, when you again mentioned technology, can be intimidating. Projects of groundwork, a lot of parting, defining that vision. These are, these types of projects in this about the transaction, and frankly, it's not about the building. We get that phone call often. A lot of communities with very well-meaning intentions will build a building and put innovation center on it, and not really have thought through the vision or thought through the partners or made the kinds of strategic partners or relationships that really make those kinds of projects successful. So I just want to encourage everyone today to keep the faith and to keep the focus. It sounds like you guys have already made an incredible, you know, first step, a giant first step in terms of the placemaking collaborative. And I would say that a lot of this work you're probably also doing with Stephanie and her group. I think last point here on this slide is really to also just encourage you to pursue, you know, I've already picked up on this as a theme this morning, pursue those public-private partnerships. We all know that we can't do it alone, and especially considering the way that the funding landscape is shifting in today's environment, making sure that you're partnered with sources to make things happen in your community is also going to be key. So I'm going to just give you the vision. We cannot prosper within our community. We can't expect our citizens to prosper. We can't expect our kids to learn or to be exposed to, you know, a competitive or successful economic environment until we have this broadband issue, right? I have been super impressed with the work that you guys are doing in Georgia, the Department of Community Affairs. I had the opportunity to listen to a workshop, I think that Deanna Perry provided, and totally commend Georgia on the audit work that they're doing with the FCC broadband map, and think that this really has to be, if it's not already, a #1 priority in your community. I'm happy to learn that within Georgia there are a number of rural independent providers that are offering affordable service. We're working with another community in the middle part of the country, and their internet provider actually has offered to pay for the ASPs. Are going to be the I should say maybe technology distributors like the AT&Ts and the Spectrums of the world are going to come in and ultimately reimburse them for that infrastructure investment. Anyway, it varies. The methodology and the infrastructure development varies from region to region here in the US. I'm happy to learn that Georgia is already off to a great start in terms of really understanding each community's need. I encourage you to make this a #1 priority and to work with the Department of Community Affairs on making sure that you're connected. Telehealth also, it should be stated and can't be emphasized enough, is going to also increasingly move over into the digital world. This is going to be particularly important as our rural hospitals. We're seeing a number of rural hospitals close in the middle part of the country. The economics are no longer working, so telehealth is going to continue to take on, you know, greater significance in this country. This one is super fun, right? I love practical principle #3. I think it maybe fits the best within the placemaking work that you guys are doing with Stephanie and with Cindy. We, I think that a lot. I think it's easy from outside look at markets like Austin, Texas, and say, well, gosh, that was just an overnight success. What did they do differently? And I will tell you, I'm here to tell you for 40-year overnight success story. What they did very well, they did 2 really key things, and we're going to talk about both of them this morning. The first is that they branded the city and they centralized the city's identity on the creative industries. So music and art, mostly music, was the brand identity that Austin led with first. They didn't lead, clearly, with technology. They attracted the tech and the digital workers, and they attracted a very educated and young workforce because they absolutely centered their brand identity around music and around the lifestyle. Austin also, as many of you know, has an amazing parks and trail system, and that sort of outdoor lifestyle was the second thing that they centered their brand identity around. Every community is going to have its own brand identity. You're going to have your very specific DNA, super cool, but really is going to attract that workforce that we're all trying to attract in our communities, or better, retain the talent that you're growing within your own community. South by Southwest is now globally recognized. That is also a 40-year success story, right? What South by Southwest did well was not only center its conference around the cool creative things that Austin had to offer. It took 40 years to grow those revenues and eventually expand marketing efforts outside of the Austin market. So Milwaukee Summerfest is just another great anecdote. We started working up in Milwaukee 3 years ago, and the first thing they said to us was, well, you know, you have a history in Austin. We want to build our own Austin city limits. And the first thing we said was, don't try, right? Milwaukee has its own brand. Don't replicate something that's already out there. Use what you have. Come from a really authentic place and authentic DNA, and really promote what you already have within your market. By doing so, you are going to organically attract the workforce that you desire. So related to that, and I will say this is the second sort of little known secret about Austin, Texas, and maybe a principle for folks to consider here in Georgia, and many of you are maybe doing this already. What the Austin Chamber did was coalesce a number of business leaders around this vision that Austin was going to become a tech hub. This was, by the way, probably a 25-year effort from soup to nuts, right? And by collectively centering the community, the business community in particular, institutions or companies that had resources, and by actually soliciting these businesses for marketing dollars, Austin was able to launch a 20-year, very aggressive marketing campaign. A lot of people don't know that, right? They think, well, it just sort of happened organically and it happened overnight. There were lots of people in the Austin market that spent a lot of time, many, many years, and some marketing dollars to get on planes and to go outside of the market. I'm not implying that is the answer for every community, but my point is here that it's important that we get all of our leaders within our community, business, higher education, if you have those within your community, to understand the importance of investing in marketing. And a lot of times we're going to have the most latitude by simply marketing within our own region, right? That's typically where it starts. And if you are so lucky as to be able to secure more resources, then, you know, by all means, expanding that geographic footprint in terms of marketing and promotion is encouraged. But a lot of times it doesn't take a lot. So Kenosha, Wisconsin is another client of ours. You can imagine after the tragic events of 3 weeks ago, we are still pretty heavy duty into crisis management mode in Kenosha. But I will tell you, before the last 3 weeks, I think I mentioned we have spent 2 years really repositioning this community. The parcel in the middle picture here is the 107-acre former automotive manufacturing site. It was dedicated to automotive manufacturing for 125 years. The city raised the site almost 10 years ago now, actually, when Chrysler went bankrupt. And the mayor came to us and said, I see what's happening in terms want to build for our community to the 21st century. And you can see the renderings on the right-hand side of this slide here. These are very early conceptual drawings, but we've been able to secure a number of partners. We're in early conversations about the advantages of coming into Kenosha. Happy to talk about that at a later time. But my point is, we spent 2 years in Kenosha getting the leaders to understand the importance of shifting that brand identity, right? We were no longer able to use the traditional economic development rules that were used in the era of industrial manufacturing. We had to take what we know about how we know technology companies or digital or even creative industries like to recruit and retain talent. And the first and almost only thing that we're doing now day to day in Kenosha is making sure that we're building that talent pipeline and making sure that we're developing a project that has a very unique sense of place. So with that, let's move into some talent recruiting strategies. Just a couple of ideas, and I was delighted to learn that you guys are doing some of these things already. As we start to think strategically about how we can really amp up our efforts to recruit talent from within our own region. I love that Savannah is using a creative technologies incentive. I love that you guys are also offering a high wage job creation grant. These are, first of all, generous incentives, I have to say, and I believe available to most communities in Georgia. We're seeing a lot of other communities, especially in the middle part of the country, again, Georgia's included in that, that are really beginning to understand the possibilities as folks who maybe, as our community members who have gone out to the San Franciscos and the New Yorks of the world, frankly, get tired of the lifestyle and get tired of the expensive, traffic-ingested environments that they're living in today. I think a lot of communities are starting to understand that this is a really opportune time to recruit those folks, whether it's alumni from your regional higher education institution or whether even it's from just the closest urban city. There's a lot of opportunity to incentivize, workforce that we all desire to come into your community. It does first and foremost hinge on placemaking. So here's another just creative idea. I encourage everybody, if this is even just something that you're curious about at this stage, I know we're in early planning days here with the Placemaking Collaborative, but check out the CompTIA Cyber States report. If you Google those terms, you'll be able to access the 2019 report. It gives a very comprehensive profile of the digitally skilled talent within your state. I'm not sure that it quite yet is providing data on a market-by-market basis, but you at least will get a sense. And Georgia has, by the way, a lot of super strong digital talent. So we encourage folks just to start there. There are a number of other resources that we're happy to share, but think about where within your region there could potentially be a talent surplus, right? And go to that deep pool of talent and think about initiating your marketing strategies. This is something that I think all of us feel strongly about and probably also feel is very overdue. I'm delighted that we are finally talking about women and minority-owned businesses, and we're talking about supporting women and minority entrepreneurs. I am super excited and was impressed with Select Cobb and their small business relief grants. I can tell you also that, and so we encourage folks to investigate the structure there and to replicate if possible. There is still a lot of COVID money on the table, and I know a lot of states are struggling with how to distribute that money as the time ticks away here. We want to also encourage folks to go to Bank of America. There are a number of programs. Bank of America happens to be, as you can imagine, a $300 million national program, but they are very focused on women and minority-owned businesses and entrepreneurial programs. We have had also over the last 6 to 9 months a lot of experience with the EDA. They have 2 grant programs that we're spending a lot of time with for clients right now. This first one is the STEM Talent Grant. And so if you have your EDA regional contact on speed dial, and hopefully most of you do, we absolutely encourage you to check this out. This is an amazing opportunity to either develop STEM talent training programs or to fund those programs that you maybe have been putting on the back burner because it takes resources and we maybe haven't had access to resources until now. This particular talent grant gives up to $300,000 for an 18 to 24 month chapter. And so we are driving all of our communities and anybody we can talk to towards this grant program. We feel very strongly about it. Microsoft also, I have to say, in terms of tech partners, has really stepped forward in terms of workforce training. They have a number of programs that are very focused on communities of color and communities of color that have been impacted by COVID, which is every community of color and every community for that matter. So I'm proud that Microsoft is stepping out there. We have a couple of programs actually in Wisconsin that we're working on funding for and eventually deploying, but we encourage everybody to investigate this opportunity as well. And speaking of public and private partnerships, I have always been impressed with the higher education system in Georgia. I am particularly impressed with the technical college system of Georgia. I think that we, frankly, are also living in an era where companies are beginning finally to understand that not everyone needs a 4-year, let alone advanced degree. So I think it's incumbent upon ourselves as economic development leaders to connect with our local community colleges or technical colleges. You guys have a super strong network there in Georgia. I think even before you forge that partnership, it's really important to sit down with your business community. I'm sure many of you are doing this already, but making sure that you have a deep understanding of what your businesses not are looking for today, because we all know how long it takes to forge partnerships with higher education institutions and get new programming up and running. Ask your business community what they need in the next 5 years. It's not to say you shouldn't be addressing immediate needs, but a lot of times we've had a tough time with the business sector being able to answer that question. This environment clearly, especially with COVID, makes things especially topsy-turvy, but starting those conversations with the intention of forging formal partnerships with training partners, especially in the era of online training and education, is particularly important. There are also a number of large companies and even higher education institutions that are very supportive of apprenticeships and internships, and we can't speak enough about the effectiveness typically of those programs, right? In fact, I heard an anecdote on one of our Georgia prep calls here about a gentleman who went away to college and came back and learned of a company and even of an industry within his community that he didn't even know about growing up in the community. So we want to make sure, obviously, that those, as simple as it sounds, that we have bridges that we're making to the industry. We're also starting to see that some cities and some counties are stepping forward as it relates to subsidizing programming. I think everyone is just starting to understand that we have a long way to go in terms of educating our communities. I've mentioned the technical college. The Quick Start program there is super impressive, and I think the sectors that Quick Start has chosen to focus on and invest in are super relevant in today's economy, innovation-based economy. And I've mentioned also that there were a couple of EDA programs. The second program is the Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistant program. EDA was given $1.5 billion nationally in May, and the EDA is working swiftly to distribute those funds. I would really encourage everyone, if you haven't already, again, to get in touch with your EDA district rep and to get educated about, and I'm happy to provide information in this regard. These are tremendous grant opportunities, and I don't think the timing, frankly, could be any better in terms of communities really investing in infrastructure and investing in the innovation future. So with that, I just want to say again a hearty thanks to Cindy and Stephanie for having me. I applaud what you guys are doing with the Placemaking Collaborative, and appreciate the chance to get to know you guys a little better today. Happy to take questions too. Kyle, if that works for you. I'm not.
Oh, yeah, so I believe we do have a few minutes, so I'm going to thank you for your time and for that insight. There have been questions about your presentation and the recording, and the responses to those have been posted in the chat. But I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie to moderate any questions from the attendants, if there are any, and also let you go back and. But if there was anything else that maybe came to mind, or if there are any other little last minute kind of side thoughts. And then like I said, I'll turn it back over to Stephanie for any additional moderation or other housekeeping or instructions.
Yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions. So if you've got anything that you'd like to ask Julie, we've got probably about six minutes. And so please feel free to throw it in the chat, or if you want to put your name in the chat, I will unmute you and you can ask in person. This presentation is being recorded, and we will have a copy of it available on the Georgia Cities Foundation website, as well as the slides that Julie provided and her contact information. We really see what Julie's team's doing as a second phase of placemaking. We teach the 5 steps of placemaking, which is centered around project development and community development. And this really goes into that next phase, which is workforce development, particularly in a field that, with the way that COVID's working, we're able to look at remote working opportunities for cities. And a lot of our cities have a really great opportunity to take advantage of remote working, particularly in the technology-driven fields. So we feel that this topic is very relevant and it could be very useful in our placemaking efforts as we're doing place-based economic development, which is a bottom-up approach, very different than traditional economic development. So I'm really excited about partnering up with Julie and the information that she has shared. So if there's any questions, please let us know. And if you think of something later, we're happy to get you connected with Julie to have those questions answered as well. All right, well, if there's no questions, then we will consider this a conclusion to our fall Georgia Economic Placemaking Collaborative Retreat. We appreciate everyone's participation. We'll be doing follow-up with the teams for more facilitated events, and we are just ecstatic that everyone was able to attend today. So thank you, Kyle, for moderating. Thank you, Tatiana and Linda, for your excellent presentation, and thank you, Julie, for your excellent presentation. And this will wrap up our session.